Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror Hangout episode. These are our every now and then semi-regular episodes that happen between the mainline episodes where we focus on movies that for whatever reason come our way but somehow don't fit into the trend line that we're running at the moment. Tonight we are talking about the 1982 magnum opus from director Amy Holden Jones, The Slumber Party Massacre. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Desert to Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer and creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, published by Comixology. He is a winner of a 2018 Best of Austin Award from the Austin Chronicle and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Drew, say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. I have no script. The movie is Slumber Party Massacre. It came out in 1982. It's directed by Amy Holden Jones, written by Rita Mae Brown. So we have an all-female, we have our power decision makers are female, and they've brought us this film. And we'll get opening thoughts, and then we'll just kind of go wherever we go. But so I don't know, Tony. I don't remember how it is that we chose Slumber Party Massacre. I may have just foisted this movie on you guys. I don't even know why.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think that's the...
Which is a little weird to me, because this actually seems a little off your beaten... There are no lesbian vampires in this.
This is not a 1970s grungy movie. There's not any of that sort of... Yeah, there's none of that weird problematicness that happens in all the horror movies that I seem to enjoy.
It's different ones.
It's got different.
It's
weird
not all of that weird.
It's got 1980s problematicness. It's a different flavor.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's funny that you would put it that way. It doesn't have all that, but does it not?
But it's not Italian. It wasn't filmed without sound.
I think the Europeanness might just make it more classy than this movie. But
I think so.
I guess we'll get opening thoughts. Tell us how much you adored the 28-year-old high school students in this movie, Tony.
I don't know if adored, because I'm definitely of the age where now, like, watching high school, even if you know the actresses are older, they're still supposed to be in high school. So you start off with the high school, and it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre knowing who the writer and director are. That these women gave you one of the most exploitative films I've seen recently. Like, I'd forgotten. I think I had seen this before, but if I did, it was definitely like me hanging out with, guy friends of mine on a weekend and renting horror movies.
I would like to list like the top 20 or so just off the top of our head, but I want to get Drew's opening thoughts. But I'd love to list the top 20 or so problematic things about this movie.
Well, it's just it's funny that it feels like an exploitative film that you would chalk up to guys being guys.
Yeah.
And all of the problems that happens when we go, oh, it's just guys being guys. Boys will be boys. Because, it begins with a girl who's like gets out of bed and decides to put her dress on because she's changes and ham-fistedly she's gonna be a woman because she slowly throws away all of her girlish toys. That's where we're at. But I looked at, when you look it up to do research for the podcast, like, whoa, okay, well, this could easily have been sleazy guys writing this, but it definitely knows its audience. This is peak drive-in / sit in the back row of a movie theater, all exploitative stuff. And it's weird that there's so much upheaval in so many ways that seeing the grody guy villain who's gross in so many ways, it doesn't even really have that many lines. He's just there to lurk and be gross. He's not supernatural like Michael Myers or Jason. He's a guy with
just
a drill.
That's
and lurking and just being gross and everything, and then just how it approaches so much. Wow. It's
okay. I definitely want to hit
something,
on.
It's something that's like, this definitely isn't a movie I don't know if I'm going to watch it again, but it's a bizarre time capsule. And in fact, I think movies like, now that I watch this, movies like Scream aren't so much making fun of or parodying, I think, some of the classics, although they do that. But this is its own almost self-parody.
Oh, yes.
That I think are really, we've talked about this several times, that a lot of times when you get somebody making a parody, they're actually parodying the third generation version of a thing because it got so insane and exploitative that that's actually where people are going over those movies. And this is definitely if you're going to say those movies, this is one of them, you know?
Yeah. Drew, I mean, so there's so much there that I want to hit on, but Drew, what are your thoughts? Opening thoughts.
This is only the third time I think I've seen this. I saw this a couple of times when I was a kid. I always remember the sort of very phallic movie poster more than I remember the actual movie. So when you brought up that we were doing it, I was like, oh, okay, that one. But I actually got a kick out of watching it this time, probably because I have like an adult eyes. When I was, kind of doing the same thing Tony was doing when I was reading about it. I think it's interesting. I didn't realize that the woman that wrote this was like a feminist author. And so, like, I think there's a lot of stuff about it that I see in it that I wouldn't have seen it without knowing that. Also, apparently, this was originally meant to be a comedy, and there is still
it's still pretty close to a comedy, to be honest with you.
Well, there's still a lot of like gallows humor in it, and some of that stuff, like the girl eating the pizza off of the dead pizza boy's body. That to me was actually legitimately kind of ghoulishly funny.
Her line is great. She goes, I feel better already. Really, I do.
Yeah.
I love that.
The other thing that was interesting to me about this as a 1980s slasher movie is this is still early enough in the genre that not all of the tropes had been fully formed. Tony was just talking about how the slasher, he isn't Michael Myers, and I think that is actually really interesting. They did nothing to elevate this guy. He's not Leatherface. He's not Michael Myers. He's just a guy with a drill. They did nothing to elevate him to be. It's kind of amazing to me that this became a short-lived franchise, but a franchise nonetheless, because there's literally nothing visually interesting about this killer. He's just like a middle-aged guy running around with a drill. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's like the drill is the whole character and the drill is his penis. But like,
I have a theory about that, but we'll get to it. Besides the phallic nature of the drill,
the other thing is like there is a final, quote unquote, final girl character, but he doesn't, like, the killer doesn't murder literally everybody. There are multiple survivors in this, and I was like, as an early slasher, it's kind of an oddity because, like, again, they hadn't cemented all the what a slasher movie was going to be by the time the 80s were over. Like the formula had not fully gelled yet, and I think that is another thing that's really interesting about this movie. Anywho, I do think that, like Tony, this is a pretty crazy time capsule of 1980s horror that we're going to be discussing.
Yes. So what I'll say about the story, and then I just want to go straight to the nature of the slasher himself. The story it's remarkably simple. Some girls are going to have a slumber party. The new girl lives across the street. They've invited her, but for various reasons of meanness, she's not going to come. And there's a killer in the neighborhood who's been killing people left and right and is going to show up at the party. That's the plot of the movie. There's nothing else to discuss. We can just talk about individual kills and individual characters from here on out, because that is the plot. Okay. The slash, I want to get to the girls in a sec, but I find it fascinating that the slasher in this movie, who I don't think he's ever actually given a name, but the guy with the drill,
it's Russ Thorne, aka the driller killer.
Oh, right, because he's escaped from a mental institution. All right. I believe the reason why he is not given a mask, because, there was certainly that trope a little bit, right? I mean, it's got to have been,
Texas Chainsaw and Halloween had both already happened.
Yeah. I think the reason he's not given a mask is because this might be, people might say this is going too far, But I think it has to do with a feminist idea of a slasher, which is that we have to reckon with the fact that he's just a regular, boring, banal, evil, violent, dangerous guy. And that's something that you hear a lot in people talking about real victimizers. Is in the end, this is just a terrible person. There's nothing special about him. It's just that through physical power or through whatever manipulation, but it's just a dude. There's nothing mysterious, no mystique. It's just a guy.
I think you're probably right about that, because like he really is, like, a lot of people talk about Michael Myers being blank, but this guy really is like a blank canvas. And
right.
You compare him to what came before, Michael Myers and Leatherface, and at this point, Jason, and then what comes after, which are really over the top slashers like Freddy and Chucky and Pinhead.
Yeah.
This guy isn't any of those things. The only thing that gives him something that stand out is the drill, and the way the drill is framed so many times. The fact that the director and the screenwriter are both women, that drill, it has to be a dick metaphor. Like
oh yes, of course it is. Yeah. So it's like all these people who talk about having been sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, is that they find their way into this room. And it's like, so this boring, pathetic man is going to be the one who is victimizing. There's nothing special about him at all, other than that through accidents and fate, he has power. In this case, the guy has an enormous power to him. But it's just the sadness of the whole situation. There's nothing special about this person. It's what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil.
This guy's sweaty and grunty.
He's just a dude, and there's, by the way, I love how the movie plays with comedy and then horror over and over again.
It's funny because it comes out a year after Student Bodies, which is extremely, you could tell.
I don't think I've ever seen that. I've heard about it. Is it like this?
When did the last time I watched it? It wasn't as funny as I thought it was when I originally saw it on cable.
Humor can be tough,
it's still like there's a lot in Student Bodies that they're really trying for something, for a parody, a level of parody that we don't see again until a lot of horror movie parodies in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's fascinating because of the way that this film almost becomes self-parody. The number of jump scares, the amount, just so much nudity that's just, hey, by the way, we just have to take a shower. Why is this scene here? Because look at all the nudity.
I'll go right out and say this movie is a parody. It's just a very, very subtle.
Right.
I don't think it's fair for them to say it was written as a parody and shot as a straight movie. It's just a parody that plays pretty straight.
I would love to see what the original script was like.
Yeah. Right.
Because apparently, like the producers made them tone down the jokes. Because like this movie still feels, and I think that's why I probably enjoyed it more watching this time, because when I was a kid, I didn't really have the sophistication to enjoy something like this, because I wanted to see like a cool looking monster. I wanted to see like better special effects, stuff like that, and which this movie does not have because it is so low rent. And again, because I think you're right. I think they were trying to purposely create a killer that was not elevated. So, when I was a kid, it was just a sort of like disappointing, this guy doesn't look cool like Jason Voorhees. Jason Voorhees looks cool. His ribs are sticking out of his chest. Like, why?
This guy just has a denim jacket.
I don't want to buy an action figure of this guy.
I would totally buy an action figure of this guy. I'm just saying.
You bring up the denim. What struck to me is I will say this: the guy's hair was the exact same color and texture as his denim jacket.
It's what another element of parody that Tony just mentioned is the level of nudity. See, this woman got to have her cake and eat it too, because she wants to make a comment. I guarantee you, she wants to make a comment about gratuitous nudity, just like Airplane did. But and the way she's going to do that is just by overloading it with incredible amounts of nudity. And yet, of course, the producers love it because they're perfectly happy to have,
right, because they're
scenes.
It's again, all I could think about the whole time was it's such a time capsule of, and more power to you. I think it's a time capsule of what horror was at the time and what producers thought they could make money off of. It's like the comedy routine. What are you gonna have in this movie? It's the Bill Hicks. And, I don't know, boobs. Oh yeah, get this man some checks.
I can't write you enough checks.
What are these boobs gonna do? Oh, I don't know, jiggle. Oh, we can't write you enough checks. It's like you picture somebody with a cigar and kind of a cheap-ish suit. Maybe it's slightly expensive, but it'll never pass in better company and going, this is great. Kids are gonna line up to see this movie. They love the slashers. They love the boobs. Put more into it. You can just picture, I just picture
the camera lingers on the nude people more than you would ever do today. That I find this fascinating. Of course.
And that's why it's just I had forgotten. I definitely had forgotten all of that. So seeing it as an adult, where especially an adult in a world and what a time capsule too, because now currently you just have the internet.
Right.
You can, if you don't like what you're seeing, if you don't like a type of whatever you're seeing, you can easily find whatever you want to see. Whereas at the time, you had to go, oh no, we're going to go see that new horror movie.
Yes.
And you would go and you're, depending on your level of hormones, how old you were, what your bag was, this could be amazing because, or it could be like, oh, it's that horror movie, or your parents would never enjoy that you're seeing this, but it's the logical leap from at other time periods be like, oh, look how short those dresses are, you can see everybody's ankles.
Yes.
But now we're in the 80s and just this is what packs them in. This is what they want the violence and they want the breasts, and it's such an 80s, and that's because you might depending on your age, you might get your, brother's Playboy or something.
Or in the case of this movie, don't forget, the movie goes out of its way to introduce the fact that these girls enjoy looking at Playgirl, which it's rare that you would see Playgirl show up in a movie. And that it's not, that they're joshing one another, calling one another pervs, but it's not an obscenity. It's just something that they've got. But what's wild to me is I forgot also this movie has the voyeurism thing. It has the boys go to the slumber party and they're watching the girls.
Well, it does,
right?
All that stuff of following the kids around. It definitely wears its Halloween influence on its shoulder.
Yeah, I love that. But what I was thinking about the voyeurism is that there was a time in the movies where if characters were shown peeping in on one another in a locker room or outside a house, that was literally the boys will be boys thing.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. It was just like, oh, boys. Well, apparently boys are peeping Toms if they can get away with it, right? And then, but we also, and I think this is very deliberate, we also are voyeurs watching these girls take showers, because generally we don't walk around, we're not allowed into these spaces as cishet men. We're not allowed into these spaces, so it's not appropriate for us to be there. So in a sense, she's bringing us into voyeur, but of course it's double-sided. It's not real. It's you've paid your ticket, you've been invited, so it's actually a pretend. It's more of a tease than actual voyeurism. I just find it fascinating how many times this movie is sort of flipping its facets of who you are as a viewer, vis-a-vis who the characters are.
I don't know if it quite succeeds at it, but I do think that this was a movie that wanted to make you question yourself for enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a super good point. Yeah,
I agree. But it's also, again, it when you talk about, hey, it was made as a comedy, why I talk about Scream is it has so many jump scares, and it does things like the woman comes up to the door, and then the mom is like, oh, a drill comes out. Oh, I'm just drilling a peephole. And it wasn't filmed.
I don't even know who the hell that woman was. But I do know that the only people who do anything useful in this movie are women. And in this case, It's this fairly butch woman who's drilling a peephole in the door and also says she's going to install some bookshelves next time.
That's right.
We all need that woman in our life.
So
She
the
But
other
it almost like, but she almost drills the one girl in the face.
Yes,
which isn't
that
the
was
safest
hilarious.
thing.
Yeah.
But all of these things just because they stack and stack and stack and they keep coming back is where I definitely had forgotten what a strange parody of itself or this what the genre was at this particular moment in 82. Starting in 80, which would have, you film it, you may be starting in early 82, you might have been starting in 81.
Mm-hmm.
That's your influences. So probably you're talking, hey, what's popular? You're talking 79 through 81 is your let's make movies like that from the producer level, right?
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
I need to look up like where the conversation was on slashers at this moment.
Well, like at this point, you've already had at least three Friday the 13th movies. So, or at least
that's
two.
enough to build a parody. Like that's enough to know what the tropes are.
The thing that I feel like the bring up Scream has an advantage over this is that you have the entirety of the 80s to mine for tropes. Whereas this one, the tropes aren't fully formed yet.
What I'm saying is we don't get much of that kind of nudge, wink, wink until Scream kind of comes back.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people who go, oh, well, no, there's this movie. And I agree, again, a year before we have Student Bodies, which is doing exactly that through and through in an almost, airplane kind of way, but more sleazy, I guess, or less PC.
I will say this: this movie, even though I'm kind of singing some of its praises, I just brought up the Friday the 13th movies. This movie, watching it, did make me realize how much more polished those early Friday the 13th movies are than I think that everybody gives them credit for. Because those are nice. Those are nice looking, atmospheric movies. This movie just looks like it was just shot in suburbia. There's some interesting shots occasionally, and again, I think the way they frame the drill, and particularly, is actually very knowing sometimes. But we did when we did the first Friday the 13th. The first Friday the 13th is actually a really pretty movie. I don't know that I would
agree with
this
you.
movie pretty.
No, this movie is perfectly adequate. It's nice. It's very competently made. I mean, no doubt about it. And by the way, the cast is uniformly perfectly fine. They're all very pretty. They're all perfectly adequate actors. The main actors are all really pretty good. I think it's hilarious that Valerie's little sister, the one who's reading the Sylvester Stallone Playgirl, seems to be as old as Valerie. I mean, the character acts like a 13-year-old. The actress appears to be 20 or so.
Okay, so even that to me was interesting about the way that girl is, because usually girls in these movies, they are active in sex, but it doesn't actually seem like they enjoy sex the same way men do. Right. So I think the fact that you did have a female character that was lusty in this way shows that this was made by women. I don't think that necessarily would be done if this was men.
Well,
the lens.
There's a time when you get older, or perhaps if you had older sisters. I didn't, but eventually you talk to friends of yours and they go, "No, man, we were way worse than guys." Like about what we talked about and stuff like that. And you find this out, you're like, "Wait a second," because especially if you feel some guilt, like, man, guys there's a lot of really bad humor. Like, no. You don't understand.
So let me ask a question.
And so seeing that where it could be a more realistic impression, of course, sans whatever pillow fighty kind of gratuitous nudity, all of that. But when you get, women discussing, oh yeah, you're a perv, haha. Oh, what about this guy, etc. That, talking to friends of mine later, like, oh, well, I had no idea. We were. Sure. When men make movies, we're sold on a totally different, this is what a slumber party is.
Yes. Well, right. And the whole idea that it's a different kind of raunchy. In other words, that a real slumber party is still raunchy, just in different ways, in ways that would be less interesting to men to like spy on. Remember how I mentioned that the girl, the woman who's installing the peephole, and you get the gag with the drill, and then she says, I'm going to put up some shelves later. And she's awesome. She is so useful. But I was thinking about the fact that the men are useless. There are no
Oh yeah,
useful
they're
men.
awful.
Even the next door neighbor. That's
the next door neighbor is actually worse in some ways.
He's kind of a creeper, to be honest with you.
He keeps coming up. And again, I think this is, when you view it as it could have been a parody, it could have been filmed as a comedy. The fact that guy goes, "Hey, I just his door's unlocked," and he becomes the jump scare several times, and it's also so ineffectual. His whole thing is, "Oh yeah, I'll watch the kids I'll watch these girls and make sure they don't get into trouble." And he gets dispatched so easily.
I guarantee you, first of all, no woman, I mean, I can't, I'm just guessing, but I would guess that no woman watching this gets a good vibe off that neighbor.
No, that guy's a creep.
He is a creep. And he's sort of a good sort of lesson for me as a man, is like, do not be this guy. Do not be this guy who, these women did not ask for you to look after them or keep them out of trouble or any of that bullshit. None of that. This is not your place. And you don't have to. Yeah.
He also has he wants to have the cool camp counselor vibe where he goes, "Hey, I won't tell on you, but be good. But I'm gonna just kind of show up around." Like,
there's just something hinky. Let's name it, okay? There's something hinky and sexual about that. There's something really. This guy is really hoping he's gonna find himself in a situation where he gets to make out with one of these teenagers. Otherwise, he would not be over here. I guarantee you. This is not a fatherly affection that this guy has for these teenagers.
No. Well, none of his look is that either.
It's grody, and it actually is sort of freeing to be able to look at this and go, I mean, we all know what's going on with this, right? And I think the director certainly does, because she wrote it. She's controlling it. She knows exactly what she's presenting here. Right. If you wanted fatherly, not threatening, Tom Bosley would wander by and would be like and wouldn't stop and linger or sneak up behind and sniff whatever the girl's holding. Like, Jesus Christ, Tom Bosley wouldn't do that. And maybe he would, and don't tell me if he did.
For real, you don't want to know. You want to have an idea of that there were a lot of people who would not be creeps and not be this guy.
Yeah.
But again, the point is, when he talks this game, but he is completely ineffectual.
Yes,
and that's the point.
The only man that's actually good at doing anything in this movie is the serial killer until his drill gets sliced in half with a machete.
So the more we talk about it, something I haven't really broached with friends of mine, because when I would seeing this as an adult versus seeing it as a teenager, a hormone-fueled teenager, I would also I need to look up more feminist takes on this movie, as well as I would love to. There's not a good way unless you're in really good friends with somebody, right? But I would like to know how many, because I never thought of it as a kid, how many lesbian friends of mine who love horror also enjoy this movie.
Nudity. Because there's a lot of cheesecake. There's just straight up pinup style cheesecake.
Yeah.
So,
well, okay. There is. It is first of all, it's a shame that we had no women on this episode. That's an oversight on our part. But
and Julia's my wife. She wouldn't give you a straight story anyway. I mean, you'd need somebody who wasn't trying to impress or unimpress me.
Some women do like cheesecake. That is a misrepresentation, and that women don't enjoy that kind of thing. Sometimes it's also a misrepresentation that you can't enjoy that kind of thing and be a feminist. Actually, Jamie would have been a good person to be on and talk about this sort of thing.
Sure.
Because she's done pinup modeling and the like in the past. But be that as it may, here we are with a bunch of dudes talking about this movie.
Yes. Yeah. But we are not very diverse. This show, one of the downsides of this particular show, which I love, but diverse we're not. And that's a problem. I don't know what to do about that.
We have to find more guests. Hey, maybe open call. Surely we have more friends. And it would be good if we could do another podcast with the Women in Casket.
Yeah. Reach out to them.
Jen
I'd love to. I'd love to get together with them. Yeah,
they're awesome. But it did, thinking about it now and just kind of ruminating in general. I it was never something I thought about, but now when I go, especially like going to film festivals and having a wide, diverse set of friends, being able to talk about everything and how important various movies are to them and what it meant. And then, even now, things I didn't think about as a kid, now watching like Scream Queen, and seeing the reactions of a lot of horror, gay horror fans and that who kind of had an awakening in that, really that movie and a few others and just kind of tooling around looking for good stuff made me definitely go, oh, when I was younger watching these films, I never thought to question or ask or even look at it. So it's definitely interesting to see, especially something like this, which is such a time capsule, and wonder, get a totally different perspective on it. But it is kind of just the way that it operates, because it's so. I mean, the whole film is so gazy. You have from the point where one of the early victims is a woman working on the phone lines.
Yes.
And guys are watching her, she's wearing tight jeans.
Right.
And they go, hey, the whole idea is that they're high school guys, so they don't have game.
Right.
Hey, what can you telephone things? And it's so blatant. But the more we talk about it, again, this is guys written by women for exactly the way guys act.
Yes.
That are terrible, which is how most high school guys are, right?
And the movie goes back and forth. I mean, what's cool about that is because you go to the girls in the showers, and if you're a guy watching it, or if you're just a girl who likes looking at naked ladies, you're enjoying looking at the naked ladies. But at the same time, what are they talking about? They're talking about their own interests. They're talking about football. They're talking about how much they like looking at guys who play basketball.
And also Mean Girl stuff where they're like, what a bitch.
Yes.
Or you're like, I don't know.
Right.
They're basically like,
they are.
She is blah blah blah, and that's why she overhears them. She shouldn't get invited to the party.
They're people having conversations, which is cool. I also want to say, no particular order, there's something else that just struck me amazingly. The driller killer murders a kid at one point, like with a knife, a boy, and he murders him in a very sexual, rapist kind of way. It's a scene that I think is intended to emasculate the victim and make him seem all the more a victim. It's not like the boy who gets killed in Halloween and just stuck to the wall. It's a sort of really violent, sexual kind of killing, and the pose is very much a rapist kind of pose where the guy's on his back, the killer is over him. It was shocking, and the other thing is it's clearly intended to be a mood breaker, it's
the most real, because we're talking about how this guy is just a guy. Like, this, of all horror movie serial killers, like, this guy in a lot of respects is one of the more realistic ones, outside of the fact that he's got this very over the top weapon through most of the movie. But then this one scene you're talking about where it's just a knife, like, it seems like you're watching a real crime for a second, and like, that's not a comfortable scene to watch.
And it could easily be, you could easily put this would have even more gravity if it was a scene in, I don't know, Hannibal, because it would be filmed in a more traditional sense, or more I guess Hannibal's more stylized, but there's a certain weight to a show like that, right? And
you can miss it. You can just skip over it and miss that this is happening in this movie,
right?
Unless whereas Hannibal, you're exactly right. The whole film is dressed up, so it asks you to pay close attention to everything. Whereas here, you're not invited to pay close attention, so you can miss how traumatizing this particular scene can be.
But again, it's funny because I don't think our podcast is about analyzing these things and really thinking about it. But it kind of goes back to a lot of the stuff we've talked about, where you'll have exploitation movies that have a lot more behind them than any horny teen who was watching them at the time.
Yes.
Everybody knew why they were going to rent this at the time. And again, you had producers going, let's just get them in the seats and right, let's show it at the drive-ins and more of this and more of that. Kids love this, right? But the more you talk about it, the more that there's more, that it's a little deeper than that. And you don't overanalyze it, but it'd be interesting to find out what the choices that were made, especially, in that switch from comedy to kind of playing it more straight. And also we have, the ending with way more agency and just like slow-mo, attack of the, everybody getting together to kill off the villain.
Yes. And there's not just a final girl. They kind of, the girls kind of get the better of him by working, by sort of working together. He does manage to kill a lot of people, rather unfortunately.
There's a crazy scene though where he's counting them. He's got, them stacked up like cordwood.
That's true. Yeah.
And he's like, he's counting.
He says some random crap,
he's the human version of the body count ticker that people used to do for these movies are terrible. Look at how many.
Yes.
And then eventually it kind of became a parody of like, ding, haha, look how many people were killed in this movie. But he's actually, that's one of the things he does.
Yes.
As a character, which is crazy. And that's actually where he's like, wait, somebody's missing.
Yeah.
The other thing about him though that's completely, again, no they've removed him from the things that made Michael Myers and Leatherface and Jason more pop culture friendly. There is no folklore or mythology around this guy. He just sort of injects himself into this neighborhood. Like they say, okay, a killer escaped. He killed people about a decade ago.
Right.
That's it. That is all we are given. They don't even he doesn't have a theme. You don't. Other than even the drill, which is sort of the symbol of this movie. It's just something random he picks up. There's no significance behind it. He gets it from the phone repair woman because she's the first victim, and then he carries it around to the rest of the movie. And maybe you're talking about like the him counting and everything. The sort of like giving him this sort of, maybe I'm reaching, but almost like this thought that he's almost like this accountant or some like random dork. Like they're trying to make him not like in other horror movies the killers are cool and the victims are not. In this movie, you definitely unequivocally root for the victims.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember Danny Peary talking about Halloween said one of the things about Halloween was that he really found the girls pretty likable and hated to see them all get killed. And it's the same thing here. Again, there's a little bit of distance in the fact that this one is played slightly for laughs. But yeah, they're all interesting girls, that they have their own faults. And
I was really rooting for the coach when she comes in for the rescue. Like I was actually hoping she'd kick a little more ass than she did.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also, you mentioned the first kill. That also sets it up. Like it's extremely chilling because she's banging on the window.
Isn't that amazing?
In the
So
van.
but it's
well done.
Also
played for a kind of a dark humor because they're having just this regular doodly conversation.
Well, it's funny and then it stops being funny. And that's a trick that they pull over and over again in this thing.
Right.
Funny and then stops being funny, which is in itself probably some kind of indictment of our culture. That women are asked to laugh and laugh and laugh and then things stop being fun.
Well, especially given, I'm going to go with you kind of bring into the movie what is going on around you. I don't have I'm not able to compartmentalize very well, especially lately coming into a movie. So with multiple things kind of burning to the ground, we're seeing more and more people called out as being predators, more and more people, rightly so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, let's quit putting up with this BS. Let's quit harboring predators. Let's actually do something about this now. The way he operates, and when he's sort of seeing this just grotesque person, grunty, sweaty guy, in conjunction with the not as sweaty but still creepy neighbor.
Yeah.
I also see this in a different light as an adult. Like, here's this predatory, what women deal with all the time, leeriness, and then just the way that he's, the girl goes back to get her books and he's waiting there in the high school.
Yeah.
Somebody goes to the van, he's waiting there for her in the van. That's the first victim that we see. And just there's a lot there about just, and it is again like the banality of this terrible person. He's not what we see in later and even more supernatural, where you have somebody like Horace Pinker in Shocker. This is just a grotesque person who's escaped, and he's gonna do grotesque things because that's what his mind tells him to do. And how he lurks, and then also how guys are constantly leering. Like, watching this now is like, whoa, that's not how you'd make a movie now. It's firmly that time capsule, but also maybe there's a lot of good reasons why we should have maybe been listening to what this exploitation is really saying.
Yes,
which I wouldn't have gotten as horny teen.
No, I agree with you completely.
But now, when you see what we talked about more and more, where exploitation sometimes is freer in a way to tell things, and sometimes you don't pick up on them. Sometimes, again, a cigar is just a cigar. It's an exploitation film that's just meant to, hey, we're putting this out on the cheap, and this is what we hope to get as many people in seats because this has all the check boxes, right?
Yeah.
But I did not expect, until we're discussing it, I watched it with different eyes and discussing it, to really go, oh, okay. Because, again, you said, hey, let's do Slumber Party Massacre. Seeing as much death and destruction as I do in the news, I gotta admit, I wasn't very, it wasn't high on my list of things I wanted to watch. But since it's a Hangout episode, I was like, well, sure, fine. It's, it's on Prime already. Let's do this. But viewing it in a different light, I think, perhaps there's more meat than I had definitely initially thought, even though it is very gazy and,
Well, I'm struggling with all of this, Tony. I mean, I really am. I mean, I like, for instance, movies are a representation. They're not the real thing, right? So you can enjoy a whole bunch of murder taking place in a movie in ways that clearly you wouldn't enjoy actual murder if it were taking place in your neighborhood. And yet, there's always going to be this argument about desensitization, and there's always going to be this argument.
You just use the words "enjoy" and "murder" in the same sentence, right?
Yes,
and
right.
As horror fans, that's something
I'm definitely
we do
not
all
the
the time.
first, right?
Right, of course.
You listen to somebody doing a podcast on the Friday 13th and go, okay, what's your favorite kill? So we're very accustomed to talking in these terms, right?
Sure.
And yet at the same time, murder itself in the real world ruins generations. You have one murder that takes place and it'll destroy generations of a family. It's not, so this is clearly, movies are more like ballet than they're like real life, really. They're representations of something. But I struggle with it. I always wonder, is it okay to be putting myself into these thoughts?
I think horror is cathartic often. Look, if you are somebody that cannot handle or you find images of violence triggering, I respect that. And there's definitely plenty of other movies of different types that you can watch. But for me, I am somebody that has had a lot of trauma. I find something in horror that helps me. It's healing to me. And I definitely am not okay with murder in real life.
Right.
I certainly would not be okay with some guy running around with a drill murdering teenagers in my neighborhood.
Right.
But I can watch a movie.
It's
like
so
this.
absurd to say that it almost doesn't bear saying. But to play through the thought process.
I mean, dude, somebody brought it up. If you remember, right around Austin, in fact, there was one of the last targets that was supposedly, we had an actual guy bombing people.
Yeah.
Just not that long ago. So, and that was and that was scary. And I found out, like I said later, that one of the local like UPS store kind of places, pack mail kind of places. The guy had to have all kinds of surveillance because he found out that he was possibly one of the places where a thing was going to be sent.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a real scary thing that's happened.
Right. So the
bombs
question
instead of
is,
drills.
is it appropriate? And I'm asking this 400 or so episodes, if you take the various extras in, is it appropriate for us is it appropriate to enjoy artistic representations of things that are not enjoyable?
To be honest, though, this is nothing new. I mean, we're even before things that have been written down, tales of yore have extreme violence. And,
that's true.
Brothers Grimm wrote down stories and made them even more palatable if you read the real stories. Or, if you go back to the Odyssey, they put a tree on fire and stab it in the eye of the Cyclops.
I like what Drew said about triggering, because to be honest with you, I think where I'm coming down is there are things where I can enjoy the thrill, the cathartic thrill of a piece of art, but sometimes it triggers you psychologically, it triggers me psychologically, and so I can't enjoy it. Stuff that involves kids getting killed may be really great. I don't like to see it, and so I have to opt myself out of it. It becomes too real.
You brought up the Friday the 13th movies, though, and I will say this. First of all, the special effects in this movie are not anywhere close to the level of the special effects that we see in the Friday the 13th movies.
Although the end has the death scene has some pretty good gore.
Yeah,
if you're
it does.
It definitely knew what it was doing for the 80s, right?
I like that sort of stuff, though, the same way that if I were to go to a magic show and I see someone perform like a really cool magic trick, like I never look at these and look at something like that and think, oh, that's a real person being hacked to pieces. I think, oh, that's cool. How did they do that?
And it is interesting that you mentioned that, because it's the same like an Alice Cooper stage show, right? Which is full of gore and craziness. We've talked about it. But what's interesting is growing up as a horror fan and having, my mom was young enough when she had me. She liked, horror movies and some of it, not so much later, but growing up that way and finally going, becoming an adult and going, oh, well, to some people, they don't see the magic show. So and I'm not talking about people like, this is the extreme let's say far right, who just want everything banned and this can't exist in my world because it's so horrible. But there's a certain level, and we've talked about this, you and I, Jason, about going, oh, well, because you've seen enough horror or see it on the news or have kids or know somebody who died or was murdered or was in a car wreck or, any number of things, your view of it goes, I don't want to see that, because I know the reality. Whereas when you're younger,
you're not
when you're a hormone-filled teen, and this is all you might see is the magic trick, and you don't understand why adults are coming down on it, because look how fake it is. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then you get to a certain point and go, oh, wait, I do now have a bunch of stuff that makes me feel differently about this. And that changes. And, certain things are going to affect you less, and you can I still love the just over the top insanity of something like Turbo Kid, where the gore is so gleefully insane.
Yeah.
I laugh because it's exactly what Drew is talking about. Like, I can't believe I'm watching this. This is what the hell. But, I won't watch some things that are perhaps even more realistically depicted, because I know what I know now.
Well, and I can't, I get the idea that you might watch a torture porn kind of movie, and it doesn't have to be a new one like an Eli Roth one. Joe Bob has played torture porn from the 70s, right? So that stuff's not new. But
that's never been my bag even then.
If you're into that kind of thing, a lot of times what you're doing, it's more like an endurance test. You're basically like ribbing one another and can we watch this? Oh, that's pretty awful. Yeah, I can watch that, sure. And that's grody, not my thing, right? But I get it. But I also think it's completely acceptable to say, no, I can't take it. I can't divorce myself from reality enough. I worry about it. I have many times worried, hey, is this hurting the culture? And I think I've come around now to the notion that it's probably not hurting the culture. I don't think people watching torture porn are actually going out doing torture. I think it's just
statistically speaking, there are so many people that watch horror movies. If horror movies actually turned people into driller killers, we would have nothing but driller killers in the
Right.
street.
And machete wielding maniacs. I mean,
So
it's the
I'm
same
not-
as
I'm
it's
not
like the
concerned
D&D
about
thing we
that.
were talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's certainly people who take it way more seriously than perhaps anybody who is making a film meant it to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, statistically, not really the case. And again, it is catharsis in the same way I was saying. Like, there's no new tales. The Greeks did it, and before that was just oral tradition. That then eventually those were written down. And there's a lot of violence. I mean, the amount of violence in the Bible.
Absolutely.
Is there's all kinds of horrible.
So I guess that's where we've come to is that if we're trying to answer that question I asked earlier, which is that is there a place in this world for watching stuff like this? I guess the answer is perfectly yes, but don't if you're triggered by it because it makes you unhappy. And I think that's fair. Yeah.
I would be interested to talk to the people, the women that made this movie about.
God, yes. Oh my God, yes.
Like what their thought process, because we've gone over about how like the killer in this movie isn't an interesting character the way say Freddy and Jason are.
Yeah.
That to me seems like maybe you talk about something that like whether or not it harms the culture. That begs the question of whether or not the people who made this movie maybe think that maybe they were saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be glorifying monsters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a fair question to ask. It's a tough question to ask as a horror fan, because I certainly do like my monsters. But I also think it's okay to have a rebuttal, and I think in a lot of ways this movie is a rebuttal to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no,
a rebuttal wrapped around a very cheesecakey, very exploitative candy shell.
Yeah. Well, and to that extent,
way more than I've thought about this ever, other than seeing the cover. And of course, the cover is 3, right, where the guy has the guitar drill.
That's 2.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, that cover is always like, I mean, because it's not Kiss, but it's like a band that would be Kiss adjacent style thing.
Yes,
and this cover I saw a lot, but that cover was the one I constantly was like, man, do I rent this or not? I mean, it looks both cheesy and what the hell insane, right?
I definitely saw it. I just can't remember a darn thing about it. But we have to reach out to Amy Holden Jones and see if she'd be willing to at least make a comment. If not, come talk to us.
I mean, if you get an interview, that would be interview. That would be great.
I would. Who knows? It depends on if she'd be interested in talking. But I will definitely reach out to her and see, because I would love to know what's her thoughts on that are, and if she thinks that we're just a bunch of idiots who are totally full of ourselves. And
I mean, there could be that like, look, I don't really want to talk to 3 white guys.
Well, and this was also so long ago that her mind might be somewhere completely different.
Right. This is the woman who wrote. Just so you know. The director of this movie also wrote Mystic Pizza and Indecent Proposal and Relic, The Relic. Sorry,
all way better movies in traditional movie sense.
Yeah.
And yet we're talking about this one.
Well, I mean this is what we do. I enjoy I enjoy sort of looking at off the beaten path kind of stuff.
I think that there's stuff. So, not to dredge all that up again, but like I was when I was talking about another movie on social media that I find highly annoying.
Yeah.
For other yet similarly fair reasons. I do think that movies that have stuff in them, like they could be useful tools for conversation. And and I definitely think this movie has a lot of that to it. Like this is the sort of movie that is a lot of fun to dissect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think and it's also Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony.
Well, I think also I find that to be way more interesting than perhaps a larger budget thing that, just barely kind of checks the boxes.
Oh,
We've
God,
talked about
yes.
a bunch of times, there's the things where people are allowed to just, hey, go do your stuff without as much studio oversight. Sometimes it can be bonkers.
Yes.
Right. But you get some of, again, we talked about it before, why I tend over the past decade or so, especially, to reject the so bad it's good and go for
right.
is there there's something genuinely worthwhile in there? Like, did you enjoy it? Did you feel something? Did it push some buttons that you liked or push them in ways you didn't like, but that was still part of the thing? Like, you
I don't
like
wanna...
whatever you like, and that's what's great about that. I hate that we kind of went to a irony-based thing when we really should just be able to like whatever, and because everybody is more complicated perhaps than they give themselves credit for.
I don't mind irony. I really don't, because this movie has lots of irony. What I mind is laziness, and truly, and look, if you're listening to this and you've tweeted or said on Facebook, "Oh, this movie's so bad it's good," whatever, because it's fine. I mean, but I'm just saying that I think that is not an analysis. It's just a thing people say just to get to the end of their own sentence. It's literally just filling the air. It's meaningless. It just doesn't mean anything. There's no such.
It comes from a level. I wish we could just get rid of the guilt of liking camp or liking. The hilarious thing is, you can like. I mean, I can listen to the cheesiest, what people consider the cheesiest music. I can also listen to classical.
Yeah, look, I Was Made for Loving You is not so bad it's good. It's just a rock song. That's all it is. It's a disco song. Well, disco is not so bad it's good. It's just disco, and
so yes. With this movie, also the thing that I always, with the amount of horror movies that were made, especially in the 80s, which was considerable.
Right.
If you are still talking about one,
right,
decades later, it has something to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if it's hard to put your finger on it.
I guarantee you that the people who put this into the theaters in 82.
Yeah.
You would be hard pressed to say a group, 3 friends are going to get on air and put out an episode of a thing where they analyze this in 2020.
Yeah.
That's like, there's no way.
Talk about it for like an hour and a half.
Yeah. So for the length of the movie. There's like,
we have our own slumber party.
Exactly. Right. You hope that when you create art that happens, but there are many movies, and I'm glad that we cover a lot of them on talk about them and just hang out, but it's when it was put out, I don't think there's so many movies that are you don't know if they're going to be in the theater 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now.
Yeah.
This movie with tons of TNA and a guy with a drill who eventually gets his arms hacked off by a machete.
Oh, and whines. He cries and whines. That's what's amazing. And again, there's so much deliberateness to this. Remember, the boy who is killed is really traumatized, obviously, as he's being killed, which is traumatic. But a lot of times in movies like this, they're just a pumpkin that's being cut. So occasionally this movie will defy expectations and make something painful. Same thing when the killer gets hurt, he's like screaming. And, and that defies expectation.
Well, also you brought up they gang up, like the women at the end of it have had enough and they gang up on him, which is not something you really see in other movies of this type where... Well, of course, again, if you were talking about like a Friday the 13th movie, 4 people could gang up on Jason and Jason would demolish them no matter what, because that's what Jason does. Jason's superhuman. But this guy is not. So you can get to see that, like, okay, evil can be defeated by cooperation. And I think there's something really cool about that.
Absolutely.
Again, you do get the really, really knowing, maybe on the nose. I don't know. That's for somebody better than me to decide. I kind of love it. The thing of her cutting off the tip of his drill with the machete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is so deliberate and so wonderful to me.
Yeah. It is. It really is. And the fact that it's a machete, which is a weapon of choice in slasher film.
Well,
like I say, I don't
the
know how to
signature
get a hold of
weapon
Amy.
of Jason.
Well, and I don't have. That's right. Absolutely. I don't have Amy Holden-Jones email or anything like that. So I'm just hoping against hope that she will hear this and will come on and say something like, "You guys are so full of yourselves. None of what you said is true. Let me tell you why I did what I did." Or yes, you're right on, and let me tell you more. Who knows?
Go back to art school.
Yeah,
bunch of hippies.
Right.
But I would love to hear her.
I mean, there's also the possibility that depending on how you're creating things, that somebody might also go, "Why would you talk about that? What's wrong with you?"
Right? Why are we talking about Mystic Pizza? Right? Exactly.
Why you three guys of all people? Why are you talking about this? There's always the possibility that'll
absolutely.
Because I've met a couple of artists.
If she wants to smack us all for wasting our youth.
I mean, again, this is our Hangout episode, so you're kind of
so funny.
We just get together. It's a little bit more self-serving than even we might normally be. But I've met people who go, "Yeah, I just made that, man. I don't know."
Yeah. I've definitely had those responses myself to people who ask me something or comment something that I did. Oftentimes, by the way, it's about something a lot dumber, which is like errors or that got introduced just in production, on a book or something like that, or choices, and some of them are very difficult to explain. Like literally, one of them. I remember once I got a complaint and somebody was like, this was for a Marvel comic I did. And somebody goes, "Why is this completely unknown magazine editor character introduced who's so awful? And it just seems like you're picking on people of this particular political viewpoint." And the answer was because originally it was J. Jonah Jameson, and at the last minute they said, "We can't use J. Jonah Jameson, so you got to use somebody else." That's why. because studio interference. That's why. Shit like that happens. Right. It's just you do the best you can, and sometimes you move really fast, and sometimes errors occur, and that's no excuse, but that's just the way it is.
You and I have a book that's full of studio interference where people have leveled things that I'm like,
right.
I can't really say much about that because I don't want to be a jerk and be ungrateful, but also that's kind of not how that was supposed to be. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I look at the review or the critique and go, and just or I just get really angry because it's not what I originally wrote. But I mean, those are choices you make. Again, this movie was a comedy.
Yeah.
At one point,
that's true.
So
I hope we do get at least some comments from her. Maybe she'll listen and go, "I have no interest in talking." I would even accept a no comment. I think that would be awesome.
I mean, we're still trying to get Alice Cooper, so who knows?
Yes. Yeah, I had high hopes for Alice Cooper, and I could not get a comment
because he turned into a werewolf and he ran away.
Dog.
I guess so. He's too busy on the driving range. I just couldn't. So, all right, we should wrap it up because we've definitely gone the length of this amazing film. Slumber Party Massacre. I really enjoyed talking about this. Tony and Drew, I mean, I know we're going to take a break here after mid-July. We're going to take a break for a while, but I'm sure we'll come back to do more. So we got a few coming up. But do you want more stuff like this? Like, is this
I mean, I don't know. Again, I'll kind of maybe segue this into my final thoughts, but along those lines,
yeah.
I tend to watch less slasher movies because, for example, I just accidentally saw somebody murdered on a video on Twitter. And that weighs on me, man.
Yeah.
I did not expect to see this video. It's important that I think more people see this video. Watching somebody forced onto the ground and murdered. Not a thing I thought I would get up in the morning and see, but also because of the way the world is, that's where we're at, and it's important. So, like I said, I wasn't really into okay, well, Slumber Party Massacre, I guess we'll watch that, right? So, as far as slasher movies go, I definitely tend towards more monstery, supernatural fair when I think about what horror movies I want to watch lately. And in fact, I'll be honest, I watched a little less horror than I might otherwise outside of the podcast. So, I don't know if this is, hey, let's start a whole slasher movie retrospective. I would do more, but I do think that talking through it is perhaps in some ways more interesting to me, getting together and hanging out and going, oh, well, this is, and just again, this one's an older, an 82 movie. So looking at it as a time capsule of, it's the short shorts and the fashion and the leering, the way that teenagers are, there's like the one long-haired-ish kind of guy who definitely is probably listening to Van Halen.
Yeah.
And all the way that these people interact. And they're also even a parody of teenagers of the time, although, I probably would have had cousins who would have acted similar and did actually. So I think it's an interesting time capsule. I think it's more interesting talking about it. But I don't know if I would have actively gone, past their Tubi or Amazon and go, oh, Slumber Party Massacre. Yeah, let me put that on tonight.
I have no idea how I came up with the list of the Hangout episodes, but let me tell you what's coming up. Slumber Party. You know what? I'll wait because Drew, you may have some final thoughts, and then I want to get into what's coming up because it is interesting. I think this will be wild. But yeah, what are your final thoughts?
I enjoyed watching. This is probably the most I've ever enjoyed watching this movie. Again, I hadn't seen it since I was probably a teenager. I think I definitely got a lot more out of it. I think this is a much smarter movie than I think a lot of people would give it credit for, as evident by our very, very dissective analysis of it. I'm kind of like Tony. Even though I did get a kick out of watching it, I tend to prefer, as far as 80s slasher goes, I definitely prefer ones that are I'm a Jason guy. I like Chucky, I like the Hellraiser movies. I definitely prefer this kind of thing when it's also distilled through a degree of hocus pocus supernatural stuff. The fact that it is just a regular guy running around murdering people makes it very uncomfortable. But again, that was sort of the point. So I can't really fault the filmmakers for that. But I'm like Tony. I don't know that I would have gone out of the way to watch this again if it hadn't been for the podcast. I am glad that I did. I got a lot out of this conversation. Although again, I do kind of regret that we had no women on this episode. It would have been great to pull Jamie or Julia on for this to see what they would have thought.
I wish we
about
could have
it.
gotten Jamie. I'll be honest with you.
I didn't even think to ask if this would be something that she'd be interested in because it's just been so long since I had seen it. So
sure. I had almost next to zero memory of it when I picked it. It was just some weird roulette that caused me to pick this movie. Just so you know,
I like how we have these discussions and Jason's like, I don't know, just pick something.
Well, no, honestly, there's a madness to it. I'm just not sure what it is because Shiver of the Vampires is certainly a sleazoid vampire picture. Slumber Party Massacre. Next week is super fun. Next week is Blood of Dracula. That is a 1950s girl gang movie. And I am so stoked about that. It's another one of those where to get strong female characters, you have to move into horror and exploitation and science fiction and stuff like that. Definitely one of those. It's basically a female version of I Was a Teenage Werewolf, and I'm so stoked. That's cool. Child's Play is after that. That's about
I am really excited to talk about Child's Play.
I don't think I've ever even seen it.
Jason, you may be surprised. It's a good film.
I'm sure it's a wonderful film. I no doubt. And finally, just because I have a crush on Eileen Davidson, Sorority House Massacre we're gonna do, and that will finish us up for the summer season.
Oh, somebody was asking about that. What's the date on that, Jason?
That is July 16th.
Okay. Yeah. Somebody asked, hey, when are you covering that? So I just want to make sure that
we're
talking about
but
it.
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm wrong. We are watching Sorority House Massacre, but Eileen Davidson was in House and Sorority Row. So
that's right.
I do not know the first damn thing about Sorority House Massacre. I think I was looking
Is there a driller killer in it?
I have no idea. I really we could really regret this, is what I'm saying, because I have no idea.
You will regret it because you're the one that keeps pulling movies out of your hat. Like apparently, like
I'm thinking maybe Drew and I should talk more. Like we should.
Yeah.
This sounds like we perhaps should be more democratic about this now that you're like, I've never seen this, and it has Massacre in the name. And Massacre is totally what I'm thinking about right now. Like
yeah,
I don't know.
I often feel like I put too much like I put too many suggestions out there when we're talking about movies to do. Apparently, I need to get over that fear and just keep suggesting things.
I don't know. Sorority House Massacre, I believe. I have no memory of like what method I was using when I picked.
All right, well, I know now that I need to. This is going to be how it's going to be. Yeah. I need to put together some kind of horror from the East / martial arts horror retrospective at some point. Then I'm going to throw that. I'm going to seed that right now because I think I could find stuff that people haven't really seen before.
Yep.
That I think will be fun. So there you go.
Hey, listen, Sorority House Massacre might turn out to be a fine film.
This was a surprise. So, hey, all for playing Indiana Jones at the video store. But
is Carol Frank is Carol Frank a woman? The director? I'm just curious.
Why are you asking me like I know?
I mean, because you know directors.
Jason, who's probably sitting in front of a device that has Google.
I have seen
on air where people are like, I thought you guys were going for final thought.
I have seen a lot of horror movies, probably more horror movies than most people could even conceive of. But I don't actually think I've ever seen Sorority House Massacre.
Well, Sorority House Massacre was directed by a person named Carol Frank, is what I'm saying, and written by Carol Frank. And I just don't know if that is I don't know if that's a man or a woman, and I'm curious, if so, somehow these two movies are related to one another and have been marketed together, and I'm curious if they also share the fact that they have female directors or not. So I guess we'll find out.
I just picture we're gonna get an email like, so 2 weeks from now we're covering Massacre House Massacre on Massacre Street in Killer Massacre Town. We just go, well, I guess we're watching the Massacre Street Massacre Town movie because that got added to the list. So
I really, it is
Massacre
very possible
away.
that I thought it's very possible I thought that I was choosing House and Sorority instead of Sorority House Massacre.
Which makes it even better. I mean, it does add to the kind of roguish nature of things. So.
Thank you. I really like that. Roguish.
I
picked that up from Lars, by the way. Lars and Max. So I can't because they had a thing called Savage Gold where they would show stuff on VHS or occasionally spurious DVD.
Mm-hmm.
But we always had to bring snacks, and the more roguish the term was, the more roguish in nature the snacks, the better. Which was a blast, by the way. So I can't take credit for that, but I really do like the term.
Fantastic.
I am going to force, like Tony, I am now loading up I'm going to force either a bunch of stop motion cave girl movies or really weird horror movies from the 1930s or the rest of the Friday the 13th franchise. I think Tony and I need to get together. There needs to be some kind of
retribution. I think
it sounds like a coup. Yeah. We're starting a coup. No more massacre, more J horror, more 30 schlock.
I'm totally down
everywhere.
With Brooklyn Gorillas and Bosom Cave Girls and
all dark house movies and Raquel Welch versus dinosaurs. Let's do it.
Yeah. I'm down with that. Maybe we're back in the fall. We're gonna take a break after Sorority House Massacre.
Jason somehow finds so I heard you Dinosaur House Massacre.
You know,
Damn it, Jason.
I'm not entirely turned off by that title.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of want to make Dinosaur House Massacre.
Yes.
Lava Shark Productions strikes again.
Holy mackerel, yes.
Talking about 80s, I haven't played it much, but right now, if you are a video game nerd like myself, on Nintendo and PS4, there is a collection called Double Dragon and Kunio-kun Retro Brawler Bundle, and it's half off. And it has original Double Dragons and then a series they call Kunio-kun, which has Renegade and River City Ransom, or how we knew them. But there's also 11 other games that never made it to the States that are translated. So like Super Dodgeball. Again, this will mean nothing if you're not probably, of the Nintendo era or a little bit, maybe slightly younger. But seeing 11 games in this series that never came out, that I only seen like hacked ROMs of for $20 basically, is so super my jam that I had to. And again, this is the originals, like Double Dragon, we would have been playing around the same time in the era that we'd be watching all these horror movies. So yeah, it is relevant. Also, I randomly on Twitter, somebody was posting about, we're talking about horror and stuff. Robo Vampire, the Robo Vampire series. I just saw it on Twitter a little while ago and was like, oh yeah, we should watch some. At least in a Hangout episode, we should watch some Robo Vampire.
No,
you can find a Robo Vampire flick on any one of the streaming services.
Mackerel, it's from the 80s.
Oh,
wow.
It is they don't care about ripping off a RoboCop suit, which isn't really in there. There's not it doesn't look like RoboCop. And
I love the idea of
hopping vampires. It's a miraculous mess.
Wow, this seems fantastic.
And there's several of them. But I just saw that. So I'm going to say last minute endorsements, Double Dragon, Kunio-kun, Retro Brawler, half off. It's on sale. And that's the main reason because, hey, we could all use some cheaper levity. And then just because the nature of things, the randomness of, if you want insanity, you should get thee to a Robo Vampire.
Yeah.
That's crazy town, which is what I love.
Wonderful. There's actually a Rift Tracks episode of Robo Vampire.
See, I go back and forth. Like, I've been watching a lot of Rift Tracks, like, just because it's innocuous, and I kind of, while I'm doing stuff around the house or doing other things. And I'm not one of those people, like we said before, like I like the originals and I like Rift Tracks. I've been watching Rift Tracks do Oblivion, the full moon. Oblivion 1 and 2, the full moon. But I also liked Those Were Crazy when I was younger as well. But,
absolutely.
I suggest watching a Robo Vampire without Rift Tracks first, because just the nature of the insanity, I think their humor lends itself well to that. But yeah, you should.
Can I just mention, by the way, and I will check out Robo Vampire because that just sounds perfect. Rift Tracks actually has a House in Sorority Row, which is free on the Roku. Okay. You can watch it on Tubi for what it's worth.
Yeah, there's tons of their stuff, Rift Tracks and MST on Tubi. Some of it's not on Shout, which is bizarre. But
who knows what logic?
I hope they keep doing that.
Yeah. Drew, do you have anything to endorse?
I do. Couple things. So I am writing a lot more because of weird turns of events that the comic book that has been just my passion project for my whole life is now my full-time job. I need to get a lot of stuff in production, and I listen to music when I write. I find that to be the easiest thing. Like I used to watch movies, but I can't do that anymore for whatever reason. It holds my attention. And the music that I have been listening to more than anything else is a band called Gangsta Grass. And the name is hokey. I will say this. I wish they were called something else, but their music is amazing. It is hip hop bluegrass fusion. And the idea behind it is that hip hop is American music, bluegrass is American music, country is American music. That music is culturally, it's meant to come together this way, and that the boundaries that we've created for ourselves are just false, and that there's no reason why something like this should exist. And the music is beautiful, and it has been like the perfect thing for all the stuff that I've been writing lately. And a lot of the songs are covers of like old, bluegrass and folk standards, but they have original compositions as well. And I just love the hell out of it. Like I've been listening to it all, and the other thing that's cool about them is they release every album in 2 versions of it. They have one album with like the actual like lyrical content with like the rappers and singers on it, and then you can also listen to it where it's just the instrumentals. So that's like also great for writing. Beautiful music, perfect for right now, when at a time where we're trying to heal racial, old racial wounds. Like this is music that can speak to that. In fact, they just put out a new song called Freedom, which really does speak to that. And I recommend anybody who's been paying attention to the news the last few years, but definitely the last few months, really go listen to that single in particular. Great group, going to be probably one of my favorite bands from here on out. I've also been enjoying the hell out of the Immortal Hulk, which I just bought a bunch of trades on Comixology because they had a sale, and I had the first. Someone gave me the first trade as a Christmas present last year, but I hadn't been able to catch up on the rest of it. And that series is really wonderful. It's just very put together. It's probably the best version of the Incredible Hulk I have ever read. And I really can't say enough nice things about it. I really, I hear they're ending it with issue 50. I really hope that they can stick the landing and come up with a really interesting end to this version of the Hulk. But I just love it, and if you haven't checked it out, you really should.
That's a really good tip, because no, I haven't. I have nothing. I'm going to hold endorsements until Sunday, because I've been so heads down on some stuff that I just haven't absorbed anything that I should share to. Well, everyone, have a wonderful week. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed discussing Slumber Party Massacre. I think this was fabulous. And once again, be excellent to each other. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.